I'm really excited to bring you the upcoming interview with a very special guest. You'll hear her discussing all the great and courageous work that she is currently engaged in. And if you feel inspired to help her with these efforts, please consider making a donation earmarked for her projects. Or feel free to give a general donation that will support the wider movement in Myanmar. Our ongoing support is so helpful and appreciated by the Burmese people during these dark days. Simply go to insightmyanmar.org/donation to contribute today. Or stay tuned to the end of the episode to hear more options. Now, let's hear from that guest herself. I'm delighted to be checking in with Thiri. Thiri, thanks so much for joining us here at Insight Myanmar Podcast.
Thank you for inviting me for this podcast. And yeah, I'm happy to share.
Yeah, so we have so much to talk about in terms of what you're doing, what you're observing, what your roles are there. But before we get into that, I just found out that we actually have a relationship going back for quite a few years. And I was quite delighted to hear about that. Why don't you share a bit about how we first met and where our connection goes back to?
So it was 10 years ago. It was in 2007 or 8. I went to the American Center to study English, and I barely speak English, and I just finished my high school, and so I went there, and there was a free class for the English learner, and it was also an accident because I asked the lady at the library if I want to attend the English class, and she put me into that class that you organize. And so I was one of the students there. The teacher are the TOT trainers that you train, and then they will have in a classroom with the Burmese learner. So I was one of the students there back in 2008.
Yeah, and that's just so cool because you're going back to my first couple months in the country. And to clarify for listeners what that was actually a course where I was training Burmese English teachers how to teach English. This actually wasn't TOT. TOT was a course after that, which was the training of trainers. And for this course, I was working with about a dozen Burmese English teachers, and I would train them in English teaching methodology. And then they would go on in the afternoon. So in the morning, we'd do English, different English teaching techniques and such. And then in the afternoons, they would actually try those techniques on teaching English language students at the American Center. And So what Thiri has told me is she was one of those students. I didn't actually interact directly with those students. I was interacting more with the teachers and then observing them and taking notes, and we were going back and talking. And so it's just so incredibly cool to hear that one of those young students that was in those classes at the back trying to learn basic English is I am now having this fluent conversation with, and we're going to be doing more than just practicing our English. We're going to be getting into a lot of serious and heavy topics, but it all goes back to those English 101 classes at the American Center.
Yeah. And also it was interesting. Like I think I listened to you explaining to the course at the SAC, which is at the American Center Library, the upper floor, and I barely understand what you said because I thought you speak too fast, and I didn't understand I at all. Like I think I only understand 10% of what you said that time.
Right. I probably did speak too fast. I probably still speak too fast, but you're at a level that you're able to understand me now. And, that's just so interesting because when I taught that course, my predecessor who was there was also bringing these teacher training courses to Burmese English teachers. And she had warned me before going in that the usual types of courses that we were running in other parts of the world, that the level of those courses we couldn't run here because the students couldn't, by student, I don't mean you actually, I mean the teachers that were in the course, that they wouldn't be able to handle that workload and that level of activity that we were expecting, which I really didn't buy into. And I really felt that I wanted to run that course at the same standards and curriculum that we did anywhere else and just do whatever I could to bring those teachers to meet those standards and have faith that they could do them if we scaffolded it and said it the right way. And they very much did. And I've never really forgotten that experience because to me, it's always spoken to seeing other foreigners come into the country and have certain kind of biases or discriminations or judgments about what it is they think people there can or can't do. When, through my experience, I really feel the way to go about it is to have the same level of standards you have anywhere else, but the methods in getting there, you have to adjust based on what you're seeing of your participants and your students in terms of what their needs are and how to help them get to those levels. And that course definitely proved it.
Yeah. It was that was the beginning of my journey itself, and you can see like the impact that the course has an impact on the student like me, that I am here today. I speak English fluently, and I already got the master's in the States, and I work in the big organizations and all the things. So there is definitely an impact, and this is the effort of that teacher, the Burmese teacher who trained us there. And it was the beginning of my journey and everything, like learning English and also other activities those days, because those days things were not open up and things were quite difficult to get. Like we have very limited resources, but from there, like before the country opened up, and then we have a country open up in a little bit in between, and now we're going back to the closed society. So in 10 years, the change has been like up and downs, and it's interesting to witness the 10 years experience.
Yeah, I'm sure. And this is just kind of a live on-air catch-up between you and I of like a decade plus. And it also fits into this podcast interview. So as we catch up, why don't you let me know what you went on to do after that course, what that, from that very beginning course, what it kind of started and inspired you, and then where you went on from that, and how you've ended up where you are now since February 2021 and what you've been doing. So I know that's a mouthful, so give us what it is you want to share.
So after the course, they selected the two people to I don't know how many people, but they give some people some scholarship to attend at the English class, the official English class at the American Center, which you usually pay around $100 or something, which is beyond my budget. And so they give that course give us the scholarship. In our class they selected two people, and somehow I got that scholarship to attend at the level class at the American Center, because at that time American Center has the English classes and also the elective classes. So so I got the scholarship to attend that the level class in the and I wasn't chosen at the beginning. It was somebody else, and somehow I got it. I don't even know, and I don't remember how I got it. But anyway, so we have to take the entrance exam, and then the Naga cyclone happened, and we were not sure if we're gonna get the scholarship, but then I ended up getting it because I passed the the entrance with the I think I met the threshold, so I could attend at the American Center, and then I want to improve my English speaking, so I went to the student club and did some public speaking trainings, and I started speaking English there. And then I also that time I wanted to study abroad. I wanted to study in Singapore, but my parents wouldn't afford, so I need to apply for the scholarship. So I started working at the local NGO, and that's helped the HIV woman. So I work with her, and then it was around the time of in 2009 2010, it was around the time that the country is talking about talking about the transition and the elections coming up, and we have to learn the election trainings, and then we have elections in 2010. And in 2010, even though the country opened up, we were not quite sure. Even though we have an election, we were not quite sure if it is true or not. So there were very few people in the country who understand politics a little bit, and who speak English. So there are very few people with two skill set, and I happen to be the one. I work with the youth organizations. And then I talk to the international media when they come to the country, because I speak English and I understand a little bit about politics. So later, one journalist asked me if I want to be a translator for him. And so I became a translator for him. And later I became a fixer. I was hired as a fixer because those days there are very few people who would work with the international media, because you can be arrested or you can be targeted by the authority if you work with the media, and it was a really great situation that time. So I happened to be one of the fixer there, and then in 2004 I started working with the New York Times, and later I worked with the Human Rights Watch and the other human rights organizations until I studied abroad in 2017. And then I got Fulbright in 2017, and I did my master's in human rights in the States. And then I got back in 2019. And 2020 it's a wasted time, and we mostly stay at home, even though I've been doing some research work. And then 2021, we are now in the coup, and I'm now working for the New York Times.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a really succinct summary for covering a lot of years there. And I do remember those scholarships that we gave out at the very end, where there were a couple available and the Burmese teachers got together, the English teachers, and decided who to give them to. And it sounds like you were the runner up. And I smiled at that, because so much of my life has turned out by me being the runner up to something that I wasn't quite able to get. And then the person in front of me not able to do it for whatever reason, and me stepping into that role. And so much of my own life has gone that way as well. So yeah, you've just been so incredibly busy, and you've done so much in this time. And that's just wonderful. And I'm really looking forward to exploring more about where your journey has taken you, and more importantly, how that journey has set you up for what you've been doing these last couple months. And to go into that, it sounds like there's been two fields that you've really been focused on. One has been being a fixer for journalists and being in journalism, and another has been looking at human rights and ethnic areas and such. So we can explore each of those one by one. So let's go first into fixer, because you had kind of brought that up a little bit. I've heard of the term fixer before, but it's always something that seems to lurk in the backgrounds that I've never quite known exactly what they do or how that works. So why don't you tell us a bit about what you've done in the role of a fixer and what your journalistic life has been like?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for asking, because fixer, it's a term like people usually ask, like, what is a fixer, and people don't really know. So my definitions of fixer is the combination of a journalist, a translator, and the tour guide, but local guide. It's not just tour, but you have to you do the logistic work. So, for example, like my work as a fixer, the work involved, like I would help the journalists develop the story angle, like when they comes into the country, because they're new to the country, or they may not be aware of every single things happening in the country. So they will come in with the set of idea that they want to do this and they want to do that, and so my job is to make it happen. So to make it happen involve that I suggest some story idea, what is happening and what would be the story word. So that I think that's what the expertise of a fixer is, as opposed to a translator, because you need to understand a little bit about journalism. Well, not a little bit. I think actually you need to understand about journalism, that what is newsworthy and what is not, and how to make it into how to make things into the newsworthy, and so that kind of thing. And you have to find the sources, and once you get the story idea developed, you have to know who would be the good person to talk to, good sources to talk to in this piece. And so we would suggest I would suggest who would be the good people for this and for that and that, and then I have to arrange meeting with those people and with the sources, and also finding the background information needed for a story to run. Because the international media, the way they work is more with the news story, so you have to develop it into a story. So I have to find the information that would be suited for this story, and also who would be the good person to talk to. The sources, it can be on the record for the quote, or off the record for the information. So I arrange that kind of meetings. And if that person that we interview doesn't speak English, then I translate for them. And when I translate, it's not just translating the language; it's also translating the culture and the meaning behind what is going on in the situation. So it's rather than the language itself, the translation, it's also reading the environment and reading the culture and reading the meanings of the hidden meanings of what that person say culturally and in that setting. And so that kind of work involved. And also I do the logistic arrangement, because since foreign journalists come into the country, I arrange. If I need to arrange, I arrange the car, and if I need to arrange the internal travel ticket, the air tickets or other things, so I arrange that kind of logistic things and the permissions to access to certain areas, and hiring a local translator. If I move to other place where I don't speak their language, I also need to hire another fixer, another translator. And so I arrange that kind of that setting. I arrange the fixer, or also arrange that payments and the itinerary of our trip, and all involved. That is that involved the logistic thing. They're mainly working with the permission stuff because dealing with the authorities in Myanmar is pretty tricky business, and it took really long time, and you never know if you're gonna get the permission to certain area or get the interview with the authority. So especially when you go to the conflict areas, it's difficult to get the permission, but it's your skill set, and if your personality, if your personal it's your skill, and if your connection that will help you get that kind of permission. So that's the work that I do, and pretty much everything behind the scene for any story. A fixer is somebody who is behind the scene to make a story happen and to make a story publish or either print or the television piece or the anything. So or the radio, any piece that international people listen or watch or read. It's about Myanmar. We are behind the scenes.
Okay, so it sounds like you're really doing just about everything with the story. I had no idea that fixers handled that many parts of it and had to wear that many hats. And as you've said, it's not just a question of doing something by the book, but having to be, it sounds like, incredibly creative and dynamic and going into situations where there really are no rule books and you have to make your own way. And because you're so involved in international media, I'm really curious to know, what is your view on how well they're accurately capturing your country and your people and your culture? What are they getting well, and what are they generally missing?
So about the accuracy and I would say facts and facts are accurate because they're very good at fact checkings and confirmations and everything. So we have to hold a pretty high standard in fact checkings in the sector. But I think there's still the nuances in addressing the culture and the people of Myanmar. So that's what I see.
You're right. You're missing the richness of all the different kind of experience and culture that you can really have there. And therein goes the nuance and the nuance might seem like a small detail, but really I think that when you're missing the nuance, you might have all the facts right, but you don't necessarily have the tools to understand and interpret those facts. So I'm curious, in your role in talking to so many different types of media, doing so many different types of stories, do you try to hint at some of this nuance and greater context and some of the simplicity that they're trying to go down the road of making things more black and white and less realistic in terms of how things actually are? Do you try to inform them of that? And if so, how is that usually received?
Yes, I am. I try that part a lot because I'm a little bit stubborn in the way that I work, and I'm principled on my values, and I don't treat people as a source, like who talk to the media, because they are people and they're human being, and they are our friends, and they are they're people in the country, and I can come across with them at some point. So with the people, I mean the people, the local people that I talk to, who we use we use their voices as the sources. But for the international media, most of the time I try to explain the complexities of it before jumping into the story, because I usually, if they're new to the country, I explain to them in Lunt of the situations, and then most of the time I would say I could resist and I push for it. Like if I'm not happy with, if I see some things need to be fixed, I push for it. Like I was like, okay, not this and not that, and I don't want to. This is not the black and white things, and I'm quite vocal on it also in the other panel or in my own writings, and I'm critical in the self-reflection of our own work, and most of the time it was okay that I could present, and I could give I could share a voice in a story, and most people respected it. But also sometimes my voices are not respected, because there's a power dynamic between the fixers and the international journalist and the editor. Sometimes even if the journalist itself agree to it and understand, the editors in as well, like in New York or Singapore or whatever, they may not understand. So it's really a tricky part that we play, and we could push for it, but at the same time, the power dynamic always stop. And just because we are local people and we're not even, it's even though people treated us with respect, there's always a vacuum of power in the decision makings in how the story unfolds at the end of it. It doesn't matter what you thought. In the end, it's mostly for the Western audience
Right.
so it changed into the language, either print or anyway. So it changed into the language of how they understand rather than the complexities. And there's also a limitation of the media, because media itself, like they cannot address on some nuances because they have a limited numbers of words and the number of page that they could run. So they cannot make they cannot make it like a research and explain the complexities into different things. So the way media works is more to get the attention of what is going on, and then maybe other people can continue digging into more detail of it. But media is more like showing the spotlight, and then anyone who are interested in it can continue working. But yeah, most of the people that I work with are ethical journalists, and they respect to the local people. But I also met the other people who may be really good at their reporting, but not in terms of the process. I don't see the respect, and I see many disrespectful behaviors and the attitudes of the journalists to the local people. And so that's really, sometimes if I see those people, I wouldn't say anything, but I thought I am skeptical of their report, whatever they say in their report, like how much they care about the people and everything. But as a person, I'm behind the scene. I saw how they treat the people that they talk to, or during the interview or after the interview. I'm cynical of some journalism, and even though they may be from the big media, and I'm skeptical of how they report. So later these days, I only work with the people rather than the media itself. It doesn't matter how big they are, but I only work with the people that I feel that I can share my voice.
Right, right. That's so interesting to hear. And it's so tragic also that when you talk about having firsthand knowledge with certain big name Western reporters, that just by the way they're covering the story, you can see they lack a certain kind of respect or interest or engagement to get it right. And then, of course, that's the view that gets spread about your country and your people. And as you're talking, it's just so funny how these things all come together, because I can't help but reflect on what I said to begin this conversation, which was that when I first got into Myanmar, I talked to my predecessor, who was an American and had actually British American, but had been in a position of training teachers, and told me flat out that the courses that we usually run to train teachers in other places in the world, it cannot work here, because the types of participants that are coming on this course simply don't have the resources to be able to be held to those standards. And, excuse my language, but I thought that was complete bullshit. And I felt that if that's true, I want to know that's true, not by some other white person telling me that, but by me trying the same course that I run anywhere else, and trying as hard as I can, and then seeing from my own experience after several times it just doesn't work. I don't want to buy it any other way. And if I have to find another way to reach those goals. So if the goals remain the same, but the way that we're going to try to work with local conditions to be able to reach those same goals, but just do it by better understanding and respective and being interested and being curious and sensitive about local context, let's see if that will work. And it absolutely did. I mean, on that course, the work and courses that followed, the work that came out from the participants was every bit at a level that I'd seen anywhere with participants in the world. And when you're talking, the anecdote that comes to mind, when people aren't curious, they do the same, or when they're not sensitive, they do the same thing that they've done in other countries. And when it doesn't work, they don't necessarily have the curiosity or the self-reflection to think about why it's not working. And where I'm going with this is I have a specific example in mind. I remember a training session that one trainer who was like, flown in from New York or something to meet with some of the young leaders in Myanmar to give some kind of specialized training. At one point in the training, he was trying to talk about like the ubiquitous of brands and capitalism around the world. I don't remember what his point was, but his metaphor was Coca-Cola. And he was talking about how Coca-Cola was everywhere and it was something that was produced anywhere and you could buy and pick it up everywhere you went. And it was this metaphor he was trying to explain. And what he didn't understand was at that point, Myanmar was one of the only countries in the world that didn't have a Coca-Cola bottling plant. Coke was available in Myanmar, but it was only available through imports from Thailand. And so at that time, not today, but at that time, Coca-Cola was kind of like an upper class, expensive beverage that you didn't have very often. You only had for special occasions. And it was kind of the opposite of a product that was just anywhere at any time that you wanted to get. And so his whole training was around this notion of something that would work in almost every other country and culture, but it didn't work there. And he wasn't curious enough or introspective enough to be able to go and investigate, why the things that were working elsewhere wasn't working here, and instead was passing that off to, the participants not being able to necessarily understand what it was he was trying to say or to get across. And, basically it was on them instead of realizing that he just needed to modify and adjust what he was trying to do to get them there in a different way. And so going back to what you're experiencing in journalism and some of the foreign journalists that come and that are trying to tell the story of your country and trying to share that with an international audience, I kind of want to flip the question. And we're talking so much about these foreign journalists that have bigger names or work for bigger networks. What about the young and maybe not so young Burmese journalists? What about the Burmese journalists thing? I said young because that's kind of on my mind with this current coup, is that we're seeing this extraordinary crop of mainly young journalists that are really getting their chance to show their stuff and tell their story and be on the scene. But of course, journalism has been a field in Myanmar for many, many years and goes back, even centuries. And so according to your knowledge of what you're seeing, not just about being a fixer for foreigners coming in, but what you've been seeing now and in the past several years from the Burmese journalists on the scenes, what do you find with them? What kind of story are they telling? How is that different?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. I would say they're incredible, especially in the coup time and the way they report. And they are risking their life because they're in the front line and going out there. And also, especially the people in the ethnic states or in different states and regions where there are very few, very few medias are can reach out to. Like even the local bid agency cannot reach out to every state and region in the country. So the journalists are really doing, they are young, or maybe they're my age, so they're doing their best, and it's incredible in a way. For now, I would say there's what you call like the divisions. So we started developing the medias in 2007, 2008, but it was very few private media, and we barely know, only like one or two of them. But before that, when we say the media, is more like the entertainment or interviewing the celebrities and everything, not the news media. So the news media started developing around 2007, 2008, but it became more around the 2009, 2010. And so since then, there are lots of people, lots of young people curious about politics, and they joined to the journalism, and they report it. But the journalism in the country, those journalists who are not, when they started it, they're not necessarily coming from when they started, it wasn't that, oh, I want to be a journalist. I think there would be very few people who became a journalist because they wanted to. It's more like they were interested in, most people who became a journalist coming from the activist background, which means they're interested in the country's affairs. So there were very limited choices for us to access to the resources out there. And so there are very, very few career for the people that time. So you cannot do the politics, or you cannot really, there are very few political science courses and everything. Plus, the situation of the journalist itself, living in the third world country with lots of crises, we are not the outsider in every crisis. We are part of the crisis. So we are the, we are the character ourselves in our story. So you cannot differentiate between the activisms versus the journalisms in a way, even though people are trying to be very professional and people are trying to be ethical and principled. But around the time since the Rohingya, even though the media is developed, the way they report about the Rohingyas crisis was not quite principled. They were we noticed they were biased, and there were lots of misinformation regarding the local media reporting about the Rohingyas issues, and they undermine the suffering of the Rohingyas people and the way the language they use and everything. So that time it was a bit I would say they were really good at the general political reporting, but in terms of the Rohingyas reporting, their quality is really, the journalism standard is really questionable. But now, like after the coup, the situation has changed. I think they're trying to be more ethical, and they're trying to be. I noticed the news reporting are getting better after the coup, and I saw the effort of the local journalists in verifying and also like writing the news to be more representing. And I think that's because they saw more responsibility in themselves, why the other very limited media access to certain places. So many journalists started seeing their role, and they more value their role more than ever, and they are more like, how do you say, like they're trying to develop their skill set since the coup. And it's super brave that they're working on the ground, and they can be in the reporting in the coup as a local journalist. It's really challenging because you can be shot dead at the spot if you are covering the protest, and you can be arrested at home, or you can be arrested because you have camera, and so it's really tricky and it's really risky for them. And many people lost their job, the local journalists, because the regime's trying to shut down the media company. So many people lost their job. It is really challenging for the journalists to continue their work under the coup, because they can be arrested, they can be beaten, and lots of things could happen to them. So yeah, they are super brave in covering the news, especially the local journalists, because without them we wouldn't be able to know. Even like for us working for the international media, we cannot go to every places. I myself is a desk reporter, so I have to rely a lot on the local reporters, and they are the starting point. And without them, we wouldn't know. And especially with the internet shut down in different places, it's really difficult to get the information. So the local media are trying really, really hard, and they have done a great job in getting the story out and risking their life. And very few people would know their effort. And when I say local people and the local journalists, that also includes the local journalists working for the local media and the local journalists working for the international media. Like people like us working for the international media, our names are not credited, even though the story may be viral or like loved by everyone, but people don't know that we existed. Because for the security reason, we cannot put our name credited, and very few people know that we exist. We don't exist actually. So, but we have been trying to produce the news about the country. So local journalists here are spending their own money, reporting for their own country, and trying to make sure their news is on the platform.
Right. I see. I want to go back to something you said just a bit ago, where you mentioned that you found that the reporting of many local reporters around the Rohingya crisis was not up to standard. Can you share a bit more why you think there were so many problems at that time in accurate reporting?
Yeah. So it was one is the access. If you sometimes the horrible and the brutality of the military, you wouldn't believe until you see them. And so one thing the local journalists why they cannot address would be the access, because to go to Rakhine, you need lots of money and you have to fly, and then different procedures and everything. So most of the local media, they don't have that kind of money to send a journalist to do an in-depth story. So maybe one main thing I would say is the access, the lack of access to them. And as opposed to the international media, they cannot spend so much money on the trip, and also they may not be able to hire a local translator and a fixer. So that's one thing. The other thing is that this is as I said, the journalism in Myanmar it's intertwined with the activisms, and so people in Myanmar, they may be politically liberal, but we are brainwashed for forever. Like since we grew up, we are brainwashed by the regimes, and the regime is famous for the previous military dictatorship. It's known as really good at divide and rule. So that was the brainwash mechanism that they use of us and them. So they always trying to make the Rohingyas as we never learned about Rohingyas or anything in our textbook, but around 2012, when the first the case happened, then they started talking about, Rohingyas are outside people. There's no Rohingyas, only like Bengali, and people who trying to manipulate the politics are trying to, destroy the countries and everything. So that's like we are brainwashed for decades. And so we have a limited information and limited access. And so it's always happened, right? When the states sponsor divisions of the ethnics, and it's easier for people for a long time, it's easier to people to believe that these people don't belong to us. And especially the country was in transition, so anything they don't want, and people were really worried that the transition from democracy would be shifted that time. I mean, transition from democracy would be shifted and getting back into the hands of the military. So their idea is just to push the country to another, to a better, to a place where the military cannot control over. So for them, the main goal is to have a transition in a state of democracy, which is free from the military. So they are pushing for it. And the journalists are also, my analysis is that the journalists are also like coming from the activism background. And so they want to push the country to that goal, like to get out of the military. So for them, anything that's challenge that effort seem as they seem as the not genuine effort. So maybe that's why they cannot see beyond the ethnicities and the citizenship boundary. So when they approach the Rohingyas issue, but I would say the main thing is the access, that they don't have finance financial power and other resources to get to the areas to understand the suffering of the Rohingyas, and to realize if it is true.
Right, right. And you mentioned that during this current crisis that you're seeing an improvement on the part of local journalists, and yet you're also working with a number of international journalists, and I'm sure even the ones you're not working with, you're reading and following their materials. So, what are you finding as the differences between how things are being reported and shared in country and how they're being shared out of country to foreigners?
I think the daily life is missing. It's missing not only in the international media, also in the local media. The daily life of the people and the life, the terror and the insecurity that we face in the daily life, those things are missing. The way, it's we will see killings and everything that you will see killings and what's it called, like other brutalities and everything. You will see it in the news, but the amount that we are facing, it's far more than that, like far more than what is written in the news or what is shown in the news. It was daily life struggle, and we have and yeah, and the story about our life, that, like, not we're not just crying, we have, how do you say, like, how do I put it, like, okay, we have that, yeah, horrible things happen. At the same time, we have life, which means, like, people staying going to the shopping centers, and people stay going to the bars, or like people still going to the going out on the streets, and they are trying to run their normal life, even though it's not normal. There is a new normal happening in Myanmar, and doesn't mean that these people are happy with what is going on, but it's a way of like healing their mind. And there are also like criticisms towards those people who could trying to maintain their normal life. And so there's a criticism towards them, as if they have no sympathies towards the people who died in the sector. But like the journalists, let's say, when they do those people who are going to those bars and etc., they are also like people who reported in the daytime in battlefields and risk their life. And at the end of the day, they go to the bar, or the protester who protest and who were in the front line and defending the security forces with the life round, with the firecrackers. They would come and to those places, and it's a way of surviving. And those kind of normal life, we may not see it in the news, because the way the news work, whenever there's a crisis, is more about the bad things, or they want to highlight how bad the situation is. But we also have other life behind the scene. So I think that one is missing. But that doesn't mean we undermine. That doesn't mean the horrible things happen to us is it's not as bad as it seems in the media. It's worse than it seems in the media, but still people are trying to find a way to survive.
Right, and that's what's so interesting about you're saying is you're actually the two examples you're giving is that on one hand, things are actually worse than are being reported, but on the other hand, even though things are worse than we're reading in the news, people are trying to have some semblance of normality in a greater terror than we're even imagining that's being reporting. So that's quite a contrast and juxtaposition to hold in your mind if you're not in the country and you're trying to understand how things actually feel.
Yeah, I have to. Whenever I talk to my friends abroad, sometimes they come and cry, and they were like, "I'm so." My friend, Burmese friends who are abroad, and they were worried about Myanmar. And one of my friends, like, she cannot have life since the coup. Like, she doesn't go out and she doesn't do the shopping anymore. She doesn't cook for herself, and she cannot concentrate on her studies and anything because her brain is overwhelmed by the incidents happening in the country, and whatever she hear or whatever she reads, whatever she consume is a negative things happening. And so she thought that things were really bad, and so like she was so yeah, things were really bad, and she was crying almost all the time, and she couldn't have life, and she feel guilty. So people who are outside has that kind of guilt, like if you're away from home and if you cannot witness the situation with your eyes, you try and if you have to picture things through the media, and you tend to see things worse than the reality. The reality is worse, but not in a way that the that people who are not there imagine.
Right. So on one hand, you talk about how there's a normalcy that's happening through this that people that are not in Myanmar don't experience. And by the way, I'm just like your friend. I'm also having a hard time going out and cooking and having any sense of normalcy before the coup, even though I'm not there. But on the other hand, you mentioned that things are actually worse than what we're reading and how it's being reported. So you've described a bit how this normalcy is trying to take place. Can you share a bit of detail about how the terror is actually worse than what we're reading? Because from what we're reading, it's already pretty bad.
Yeah. What we're not safe at all at home. Like you can arrest you never know when your doors will be broken into, and like here's how we live. Like every night before after 8 p.m. I'm scared for no reason. If the dark comes, I feel like something's gonna happen, and are they going to arrest me or anybody got arrested, or with that fears that we live. And then we never know. You never know when they're gonna break into your home. So I'm not living at my homes, and I'm living at another safe place. And every night before I go to bed, I have to hide my phone into different places, like I hide it in my underwear boxes because the soldiers are superstitious and they don't want to touch on the woman's underwear. So I usually hide my phones in those underwear so that they don't touch, even if they breaks into my room, my place, and then they search for it. I don't want them to find my phone. So every night, and also like there are many nights where we have to turn off the light and stay in the dark for hours, or if the soldiers are coming into the street. And sometimes even in the daytime when they walk past and when they're in the neighborhood, we have to hide in the home, turn off the light and cover our windows with everything so that they don't know that there are people inside, because they can come into your home and take you for pottering, or they can arrest you, or they can do anything. They can they can destroy your properties for no reason. So we are scared, and you can be arrested just to stay inside home, and you can be shot to death, or you can get injured staying inside home, because they may randomly go into the neighborhood and they may randomly shoot at home. And so we can be targeted, shoot at home with the real guns, or sometimes with the slingshot for no reason. They just come and they just want to scare people. And even going from place to place, it's like from a quarter blocks, we have to leave the phone at home, or we have to prepare how to get out, because we don't want to get caught on the way. And if we go to one place, we go home quick because we don't want to be stopped on the way, and anything could happen because we never know when they're gonna come. And my situation is that now, like, they also use the home cars to arrest people or to hit people. And so whenever I got off the car, I don't trust anyone, even the normal car. I don't trust. And then even the normal people, if they just stare at me for no reason, I that person an informer, and why is that person watching me, and are they trying to trace me, or lots of fears. Like fear is everywhere in every part of our life that you cannot explain it in the media. The fear is all. You live in fear, and you feel helpless because you cannot help if your friends tell you something's happened to your home, or if your neighbor tell, you cannot help, but you also cannot ask for help. It's really the helpless situation of knowing that we can get killed at any time for no reason, and we can get arrested at any time for no reason. So we cannot have for me, I also cannot put the money in the bank, because we never know when the banks will be bankrupted, or the regime's going to rob our money. And the ATM, even from the ATM, you have to queue up really long queue, and you own just for $200 worth of money. And if you keep cash in your hands, you have to be afraid that what if they break in for gas registrations or whatever reason, and they can steal those money. So we have to hide money in our homes as well. So it's not safe. The feeling, I cannot explain the feeling of a lack of safety and live in fear every single moment. It's the most difficult thing. There is an unknown fear that we have, and that we have to live. Even though we will be happy at one moment, you never know. So people abroad, like my friends abroad, when she called me when she was worried and she doesn't have life, I was comforting her that, oh, don't worry, we have our own life. I was having my wine. I was having wine, and I was having some snack that night and I was about to watch movie when I talked to her, and I was comforting her to have her own life. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that which means I have my own life. I can have wine and have some chill time, but it doesn't mean that I am safe or I am in a better position, because in any seconds they're going to break into your door and they can take you from home, or they can kill you, or they can do anything to you, and there's no law, and everything they say is the law. So imagine how bad it would be for the people who are not as privileged as I am, living in a tent.
Right. So you talk about being privileged in ways that others are not. Who are those people that don't have that sense of privilege that you have? Why are they more vulnerable?
Let's say for me, like I'm from a certain socioeconomic status by now, because of my work, and I can spend more money, and I have my own business and everything. So I have I'm better off in a way. So I'm in a safe houses, but for the people, especially in the suburban areas, the factory workers, they live on the squatters. Like the squatters is that they don't own the home, and they're moving around, and they are living in the places where in the middle of the dirty drain, they build their houses, and the houses are overlap in the crowded places, and their incomes are less than $1 a day, or around $1 a day. So there are people like that, and the people whose home they're tent, and they don't have they don't have full walls. Like they may only have 3 walls in their homes, and these people are vulnerable. And these people who are, they're in the suburban area, they're factory workers, and they're from the lower socioeconomic status, and the soldiers tend to crack down more on these people, because they don't have. It's more like if rich or some powerful people die, they have a lot of people to share the condolences to. But these people, they're not. People living in those areas, they're more vulnerable because they don't have resources, and soldiers don't even treat them as human beings. and they can kill them all. So it's that's one group of people, and also people in this area where the military did the airstrikes. They're running from their homes, and they don't really have that kind of privilege that I have. But I'm telling the extreme difference. But there are other people who are less privileged than I am, who may not be even the local journalists. They may not have as much income as I have. So they don't have that kind of privilege that I have, even though they are also the journalists. But the people in the factory areas and people in the lower socioeconomic status, they are more vulnerable, and they are being more targeted by the regime forces.
I guess that wouldn't be so surprising, because what we've seen of the military is that many of them are just bullies at heart, and bullies always like to go after the most vulnerable, where they're going to be the least exposed and have the least pushback. And so that's just kind of fitting into that whole narrative. I do want to go back to what you said a bit ago regarding your sense of fear. And I'm just so sorry to hear that. You really do give quite a vivid description, which I think is important for our listeners to understand at a human level, beyond just the stories, of what it actually feels like, what it is actually like to live there. And I want to go a little deeper into your description of how that fear takes hold. It sounds like it can come at any time of the day for any reason, for something you see or don't see or imagine or is really there. But you mentioned how after 8 p.m., I think it was, it comes on much more strongly. And I just want to know more about the nature that fear takes. Like, how does it manifest? Is it in the stomach? Does it cause nightmares? Or is one able to sleep? Does one have headaches? Is it a fast heartbeat? So, like, physically and mentally, emotionally, etc. How is that fear actually manifesting for you?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was because I said 8 p.m. because 8 p.m. is a curfew time. So 8 to 4 p.m. is a curfew time. And so by 7 p.m., we have to be rush home because we don't want to get caught on the way, or you never know what could happen on the street if you go home late. And so all the stores and everything is closed by them. So after 8 p.m., people started banging pots and pans. They're still doing since the beginning. And amidst all the crackdown, that's the only resistance that people can show. And so we still do that. So after the banging pots and pans, it was more like a silence. And then they usually arrest people around midnight. And so from midnight to 4 a.m., it was like a really long time. And at the beginning, in February, when the night terror happened, we couldn't even sleep for days. And I couldn't sleep for 2 weeks. I only slept for 4 hours a night for 2 weeks, and at the beginning of the coup, not knowing when they're going to knock on your door. And by when we see the light in the daytime, it's some kind of hope, even though bad things could still happen. But just to see the light itself, it's some kind of hope, and it's some kind of security that you feel. So the feeling is that my heart, it's a heavy heart, and also like there is a mixture of feeling of that fear. You have that unknown fear, but at the same time you have that range that we hate them, and I hate them in our from my bone marrow, and I hate them because I cannot do anything to them, and seeing what other people are suffering, there's nothing I can do to help others. So that feeling, it's just like some kind of big ball inside my chest, between my chest and the neck, and it was almost getting out of the mouth. and also in terms of the nightmare, like got the nightmares, like I got arrested or I got killed or I was running and hiding things every couple of nights, and I would dream about that. And because even though we sleep, the mind is not actually sleeping. In the morning, I woke up with the tense muscle and I don't feel like fresh. Something is a bit dull in a way that you don't have much energy to do anything because you're overwhelmed by the fear and also like anger. You're angry for things that you cannot really do just because they have weapons and we have to hide it. It's a really difficult feeling, and that fear can it can cloud every moment of our life because it's not normal and we don't have a normal life anymore. Even though we're trying to live like normal, there's no more normal life. We see the sunset, we want to take the photos and enjoy it, but we cannot because they can arrest you with a camera on the street. And whatever you do, even like going to the one crazy things is that one time I slept over at my friend's place, and then in the morning we went out for the breakfast, and there's a place where we have to pass the place where the security forces were based, and then I was wearing because I was sleeping over, so I was wearing my normal clothes, which is not the home clothes, and I was having my little handbag, which is the orange color, raincoat, like a raincoat. It's a waterproof bag, but it's mostly for the protester. So we were afraid to. My friends and I were afraid to take that bags because they can grab you on the way, thinking that you can be a protester. So we hide that waterproof handbags into one of the pockets. Because we were walking. It's just like a few miles away from home. It's 2 blocks away from the home to get the breakfast. But we are also trying to make sure the way we wear doesn't look like we are about to protest. So we're trying to wear like a home clothes, and whenever we go out, we're trying to dress in home clothing so that if they stop us, we can say we are just buying something here and there. And so that morning we went out for the breakfast, and we were very careful about what we wear, and if we wear a little nice, we took off because we don't want them to mistaken us with the protester. So we went to the breakfast place, and then we were scared that they're gonna come and arrest us because a few days before that, there were people who were having breakfast at a tea shop, and they got taken from the shop for no reason. Like the soldier came into the tea shop and arrested the arrested the servers and the people who are eating. They only let go of the really old people, but everyone got to jail for like a week or something. So we were scared that could happen to us. And so even having the breakfast, we were like looking back because we never know when they're going to come. And we have to hide our phone. I hide my phone everywhere I go, and I have different phones. And it just extra work. And yeah, that's the situation. Even going out for breakfast, you have to be careful what kinds of clothes that you wear and what color of the clothes you wear, and what is the things that you carry. You don't feel safe at all. That's the daily life that we are having, and we cannot sit at a place for a long time because you never know, they will come with the car and they can take you all. And if you're walking and they can hit you with a car, like on the other day, we saw the video that they hit a bicycle with a car, with their military vehicle, and they arrested that person. He was just bicycling on the road, on the public road. It's crazy. It's super crazy to see all this thing. It's beyond words to express what it's like to live under this regime. They're just stupid and cruel and nasty.
Right. So when you talk about not being able to sleep for a couple weeks, or about just the levels of fear and anger that you're going through faced with this kind of reality, you've now been living in this reality for, at the time we're recording this, at least for, about 10 weeks or so. And so have you developed any strategies for dealing with these really difficult emotions, probably to this level of intensity and extent you've never experienced before in your life, but are now a daily occurrence throughout the day? When these were first coming and they were overwhelming, but as they've continued, is there any strategies you've been able to develop mentally, physically, emotionally, any other way, spiritually even, that has helped you to deal with some of these difficulties better
Well, I got
now than you were dealing
numb.
with
I
initially?
got my thick wall back. As a human rights researcher, in my work, in my 5 years experience, I would go to the conflict setting, and I listen to the first-hand accounts of the people whose family got killed or harmed by the military. So I'm quite used to this kind of brutality. So those days, I developed the thick emotion wall. So I see things as a profession and I listen, but I don't feel it anymore. So I got it. But then that wall was broken when I studied abroad because I was away from home and I don't need to associate with this. So the wall was when the wall was broken, it was really horrible for me to go through the emotional processing. But now I got that wall back, especially after the 14 no, no yeah on the 14th of March. That's when lots of people got killed, and since then I got that thick wall back. So I'm quite numb to the situation, even though I live in fear, but I'm quite numb to general situations. Sometimes I don't even feel it anymore. I was like, okay, let it go. Just if they arrest me, I'm gonna go. And if they kill me, I'm gonna get killed. That's it. I will fight until my last breath, but I'm not going to, instead of living under them, I would rather die and not feeling the fears anymore. I don't like the feeling of getting fear. I hate fear and I don't want it. So instead of living like this, I would rather let it go. And as far as I can protect the information that I carry, and as far as I can protect the safety of the people who are working with me or who have shared the information with me, and or my friends and my family, I don't really care about myself. I don't. It's like living in hell. You don't feel free. And every morning when you wake up, you wish that this is just a dream and everything should be over. That's what I wish for. And because I'm losing my friends, many of my friends are already gone. They're going to the jungle to join the armed forces. And many of my friends got arrested and people got killed, but I don't know when I will be the next, or my loved one, or people who I know, who I care, will be the next. You never know. And so I believe that, the strategy that I would develop is that I believe that we will win because we deserve better, and we definitely will win. But what I'm not sure is who will survive and how many of us will survive to witness the victory. I may not be there to see the victory, and or even if I see them, many of my friends might not. So that's the future waiting ahead of us. I'm just continue with one hope that we will win. But also it's scary that how things are gonna unfold in the future. And I don't know who will survive to witness the victory.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Those are really heavy words, and I'm emotional hearing that as well. With how many friends I have there, and knowing you, and knowing the terror that people are under, and that just really brings home how what people are going through, and what they're striving for. And when those of us are hearing those words, it's hard to know how to respond. It's just a feeling of such helplessness, and anger and sorrow, and it's just, I don't know what to say, except it's hard to know how to respond, and that you have a lot of people outside of your country right now that are living in a place of safety and freedom, but that are using all of their time and resources to be able to help you in any way that we can.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I had a chance to leave the country. Actually, I got visa. I got the US visa, and also I got the Thai visa, but I decided to stay because I cannot carry the survival guilt, and plus I want to be together. I may not be able to help any. I decided to leave many times. I thought about leaving, but I feel like I talk to my friends, and me being here may not be helpful at all, but me being here is it's some kind of hope and solidarity. And so people don't leave with the reasons, like, because leaving, it will wrong signal the my friends and my comrade that, oh, she's she is doubting about our victory. Is that why she left? And I don't want to give that wrong signal into them. That's why I continue staying as long as I can. Being a journalist, and it's and also working with the activists, and I myself coming from the activism background, and I'm working with this, helping with the strike committee. I have a really high risk, but still, like, we continue staying. People here, other people also, there are people who got a chance to leave the country, but they decided to stay. I'm not saying those people who are leaving, I'm not saying anything bad about them, because I think anyone should survive. Like, surviving itself is a victory for me by now, because even if they cannot kill us all. So if any one of us survive, whether inside the country or outside, this is our victory. So I count the victory with the survival. So we survive, and even if one person left, that's our victory, because that person will continue the fight. And so, like, there are people who are doing in any possible way they can to help the situation improve. I really appreciate everyone, and I really value the effort of each and everyone, whether they are inside or outside the country or wherever they are. We are all in this together, and I know that we are fighting in any possible way. We are, and our fate is in our hands, and we know that we really appreciate the support from the international people and people everywhere, but we understand that the fight is our fight, and the fate is in our hands, given that the international structures and the UN structures with the bureaucratic procedure, it won't, very little help that they can give other than the condemnations or putting sanction. And yeah, as somebody who understands about how the human rights structure works, global human rights structure works, I don't have much hope on them that they're gonna bring some changes to us. The world has always, not the people, I mean the UN and the governmental structure, has always failed in crisis, in the mass atrocities. They only say never again, but they didn't do any potential measure to stop them. So they fail in every mass atrocities. They fail for Rohingyas, and they also fail for the crisis and everything. So I don't have much hope on them unless they change. There's a structural issues there. And so I really appreciate the effort everyone put in making the situation better. But yeah, we have to rely on ourselves, and the fate is in our hands.
And so, for the international audience who is listening to this and who wants to help as they can, what words would you have for them? How can they help in a way that would be needed
Well, at the moment,
for
what
your
we
people in
need
your
is
country now?
at least for me, is the hope and solidarity. At least knowing that people don't forget us. This is what happened. We did lots of local people. Whenever the international media come, like when during the CNN trip, you may see, it's all about hope. So hope is the only one that has driven us. And so rather than the practical help, I don't know what the practical help that the international community can do without changing the structure. Sharing information about us and like standing with us, solidarity and the hope would be the only thing that would be, they are the things that would be helpful for us, because that will help us continue. Don't don't treat our suffering or our news as some kind of breakfast table reading. Just continue sharing, because at least that we can do. And I want our situation to be heard by people. I don't want this to die out, like and gone after another big incidents happen. We don't want it to faded it away. We don't want our suffering to be faded it away, because we are actual human being, and yeah, we need that kind of support. Yeah, like solidarity with us and continue supporting us.
I'm glad you mentioned the visit by CNN. This was Clarissa Ward who came, because that was a question I wanted to get at you with. There's some different views about her visit and her reporting. There are definitely some people who are quite delighted. A lot of Burmese who are quite delighted that you had such a major network that was coming there to report to many more people and try to bring access to the Western world as to what was happening. There were also some comments made by different CNN reporters and Clarissa Ward herself that many in country and out of country as well, like myself, were pretty dismayed at, in terms of referencing that the journalism that they were doing was somehow groundbreaking in a way that was a bit offensive and dismissive for all of the great local journalism that has been going on for so long. And even Clarissa Ward herself made a somewhat controversial statement that I don't have it in front of me, so I'm paraphrasing, but something to the extent that the Burmese people were loving and appreciating everything she had been doing on their behalf, but that white Western males were critical of her, which itself was quite offensive to how many young Burmese and female journalists there were that had been critical from the start. And a number of tweets came in response to that, joking that they were really white males in America in disguise after all this time. But in any case, I'm curious what your take on that visit is, on Clarissa Ward of CNN Coming, the coverage that she did, the commentary kind of around before and after what that visit was. How do you feel about that whole interaction?
Well, I'm one of the person who is critical of her visit and the way they use the language. Like, oh, she's the very first one international journalist who is assassin, and I'm critical of their lack of transparency on this trip. Like, how they got invited and how they got the access. It was a red carpet setting. It's more about the process, how she carry out the interview, like, talking to the people on the street who can be taken after all. But anyway, this is what we thought, and this is what I'm in general critical of this kind of parachute journalism. But in the meantime, when I look at the people, lots of Burmese people liked her visit because, as I said, it's her visit won't change anything, and so like I see it as it's a hierarchy of knowledge and hierarchy of criticisms. In the end, it doesn't matter what I think. It's matter what the people feel. Her reporting, she should have been more, I would say she should have been more reflected on her journey. Like, even though the reporting itself is problematic, I think seeing that people have having hope, whether it is false or real, it will make them survive. So in that sense, CNN visit is important and makes the movement, make people, continue their fight. And then I want them to be more cautious with the situation in next time when they go to any conflict sector, rather than don't treat them as your source or your characters or some kind of materials in your report. That treat people as human beings because they have put so much hope on you. And then you should take more, you need to take responsibility. I think that's a responsibility of the journalist, and the way she sounds is not quite respectful to the local journalists who risk their life and reporting, like knowing that, oh, I'm the only one, who got it. It's quite arrogant tone, but she should be more careful like that in the future. Anything, I did not know that, but in my experience, when I work with one of the really, one big agency, and I took them to the Rohingyas camp, and then it was a video report, and she was so sympathetic in the microphone and in the camera, and I was like, okay, this is happening, and then the way the TV journalist would say, but then. And she doesn't let she doesn't like the Rohingyas kids coming to her because one of them was coughing. So she was like, oh, please, can you move them and etc. So I was like, I have seen that kind of journalist. So I don't want any journalist to be like that, because if they go to any places, people see you as a hope. It doesn't matter what we think. For us, we are some kind of privilege, and we have, at least having internet at home is a privilege now, and so we can discuss that kind of thing of what should be and what it shouldn't be. But for the local people, it doesn't matter. It's only the hope that if any outsider come, it's a hope that they carry, and they want to continue having that hope. And so for the outside people, reporter, anybody from the UN or anywhere and any places, they should be more careful. They should take more responsibility in respecting the local people. Journalism or the white center, white center journalism. We are criticizing, but at the same time, we are criticizing them for not respecting the local people, for criticizing them because they don't respect the the local people. They like the way they treat their local people. It's more like lesser human being than these people. The people may have that savior mentality to anything. It is a problem for us, but for the people, for now, I think it's the hope that they can carry, and they would do anything they can to get that hope. So for me personally, I don't like her trip, and her information doesn't have much information, and she is doing a stunt that, oh, I am here in Myanmar, etc. And like the tweeting the air tickets and anything. She could have been low profile, and which I would do it if I were her.
Yeah, that's interesting. And changing gears a little bit, I understand that you're also active in some of the strikes that are going on. Can you share a bit more about what you're doing there?
I wasn't go out myself because I am not. I'm more like just reporting, doing the logistical support to the strike committees. So if they need the safe houses or if they need money, I'm more like a one-stop service for them. So they can call me and they can ask me, and so I make it happen. Being a fixer, I have lots of connections and I know how to make things done. So when they call me, and if they don't know where to find which, they call me and I help them with the things that they need. Like if they need the meeting space, I arrange the meeting space for them, or other things, like many other things, that, or if they need the supply, or if they need money, and I'm trying to make it happen.
Right. So that sounds like that itself can be quite a hectic, high stakes, intense situation to have all these requests coming that sometimes I imagine could literally be a matter of life and death, and then having to deliver on whatever request is coming at any minute, and then the next minute something else that needs to be delivered. So that seems like that could be quite a bit to handle.
Yeah, you have to respond quick because they should not stay at one place for a long time. And when they ask for it, it's more like you do the immediate response to them, and also like sometimes they need money in terms of the money, because there is a problem with the money flow inside the country. They cannot wait for the money from the donation. So I have to use my own money and to pay at front before their money comes. So that thing's also involved in my work. Or I take money from someone else and trying to switch make the money flow internally. So that kind of process involved. Or somebody needs a printer, so like A3 printer. So they need to print it from the one area to another, and arrange that kind of thing. Like bringing how to get because the one time I brought the printer from Hlaing Daya, which is more like a battle zone. It was 2 days after the Hlaing Daya crackdown, and there was no internet access or anything. So we need to get the A3. One group wanted the A3 printer, so I have to find the A3 printer in town, and so I got it. And that A3 printer is coming from the area where it was brutally cracked down 2 days before. So all the access are closed. So I have to arrange that, bring in the printer to the border of Hlaing Daya. Is still in Yangon. It's more like a suburban area, but the people there may not be able to come all the way to downtown area. So we have to make like an arrangement of like border area, suburban, and the downtown area. We drop the printer off one place and then arrange to carry that printer to one area in downtown. So that kind of arrangement that I would do.
Right, right. And it sounds like you are fitting into a role based on who you've been and what you've done for years past. And this is what we're seeing of everyone now. People that are coming from whatever their profession or their skill sets or their connections are, that is how they're fitting into the best role that they can play here. Because obviously not everyone is meant to be on the front lines. Different people can be play productive roles in different places depending on who they are. And you mentioned about funds and the difficulty of being able to get funds in and urgently give them to different people and activities that need them at that moment. And we should also mention that our platform is able to accept donations from anywhere outside of the country, and we are able to get it inside. And so, for those that are listening to Theory Speak and that would especially like to support her and the work that she's doing and the people that she's supporting, we do encourage you to listen to the end of our interview, when will be the end of this episode, when we'll be sharing a bit about how those donations can be given, and make sure to earmark where you want it to go. And so people listening can do more than just listen. They can actually support and play a role in this difficult time. I do want to ask a question about safe houses, because this is something that I think everyone has seen in movies or heard about in wartime or such. But what a safe house actually is, what makes it safe, what it looks like, how you determine it and set it up. I think these are things that very few people, myself definitely, has no real experience in. So, can you share a bit about what a safe house actually is and how you go about setting up or determining a safe house existing and being available for people?
Yeah. So, like, and living under the dictatorship, no place is safe. Even 1 square feet of land is not safe. So there's no actual. It's technically the safe house, but not may not be safe. You can be arrested at any time. But anyway, so we have two kinds of safe houses. The one is it's more like hop in place. When you you may register your home address somewhere, and then you need to leave. You need to abandon that place for your safety reason. But you still want to go out and involve in the activities because you need to. And for that, there are places like hop-in places. They can go and stay, and then it's more like a temporary safe house. So they can go and stay and work there, and until to the to and they can still go in and out. Like maybe, yeah. I heard the knocking. So you can still go in and out and work in there, and it's more like a temporary place. That's one kind of safe house. And the other safe house that we say is when you need to hide your identity at all. So it will not have any internet or anything, but it will have somebody who will help you with the shoppings and etc. To that level, it's that you have to hide completely. You don't meet with anyone, and you don't talk to anyone, and you talk to very few people, and you have a really you don't go out at all at this stage. So for now, most of the safe houses for the activists are the hop-in places. They will go there temporarily until they find another safe place, or until they can operate their work. They would go to that hop-in places, and there we have to make sure it's there. We have to make there are many available. Once one safe house is exposed, we cannot use it again. We have to find another one, and so that's the tricky part, because in Myanmar, when we rent the house, we have to pay. We have to make a contract for at least 6 months or a year. So we need to make sure we have enough money to pay for the safe houses. Sometimes people give out their homes, and they agree to take the people in and stay with them. Or sometimes people donate their homes, empty homes, to use as a safe house, like my mom did. And sometimes most of the time we rent the place, but we cannot make it empty, because we have to, before, if we just rent into, the people are going to know that these people are hiding. So we have to make sure there's somebody there and operate it as a normal home, so that people can go in. So there are lots of settings needed for the safe houses, but we have a shortage of safe houses, because we need the safe houses for the journalists, and safe houses for the activists, and also safe houses for the CRPH, the people working with the CRPH, the people who are helping the government, the parallel government, the elected government. And so, based on different type, we have to make sure things are okay. So some of the safe houses are just for the journalists. So even if we have safe houses, we cannot give it to the journalists, because give it to the activists, because we are saving it up for the journalists, and for activists, they would need it right away. And so we have to create the hub in places for a couple of nights for them to stay, and then we find another place for them. So nothing is really safe, but it's more like unregistered place, But there's a chance you can be targeted, because the neighbor may know you are the newcomers in the neighborhood, and if there's any infiltrators in the neighborhood, we call them delan, which is a word to describe the informer to the authority. So they would check who are new to the neighborhood, and then they can inform to the security forces, and the people in hiding can be arrested. So yeah, there are lots of different things involved, and we need money. And also these days we have to register for the house registration. The idea is to target these people who are in hiding, but also it is also targeting the young people. If they know if that house has a young person, they would go after that house. So being young in Myanmar at the moment, it's a risk. It's just because you're young, no reason. Just because you're under 40, if you're between 16 and 40, there's a chance that you can be arrested for no reason, just because you are young.
Right. Yeah, that's terrible. And that's so much pressure that everyone has to be on under those circumstances. I also want to ask a little bit about your background in human rights, because I understand that you've also done considerable work with human rights organizations in Myanmar prior to the coup, which I imagine, given your research and your practice there and probably your deeper study and understanding of the Tamada, that probably comes into play now. So what is your background in human rights? What have you done, and how is that informing what you're doing in the present moment?
So I used to work with Human Rights Watch as a consultant for the Burma researcher. So as part of my work, I went to the conflict zones and documenting the human rights abuses. So I am experienced in that, documenting how to document the human rights in the conflict setting. So like how to get the testimonies, and how to make sure the information are solid and verified, and how to collect the information that would be fit for the human rights investigation. So that's what I have learned from the Human Rights Watch. And I also work with the other human rights organization. As a fixer or the researcher, I work with the Holocaust Memorial Museums and those kind of work. And I also work on the advocacy process project mostly with the Human Rights Watch, but also with the other organizations. So I have that. Mostly I have the field experience of how to document the human rights abuses. And so that's more like my expertise. And so with that, I learned the patterns of violence that the military commit, and so the nature of them and what they usually do in the conflict setting. So what I see in the city, it's not something new, because this is what I have been hearing over the years in the areas where I work. But the difference is that before I only heard and I very few cases I would see the video record or the photos records or the or the witness in myself. Where I would listen to the first-hand account of people and document it, but this time is different because I can see the footages myself and I witness it myself, and then photos and everything available. So this is the level. This is more like I actually see it with my eyes this time. So the knowledge and the documentation helped me with the systematic documenting of the abuses. Like when sometimes the problem with the human rights documentation, the challenge with the human rights documentation is that in many cases, people suffer a lot. So they want to get the attention and they like to exaggerate the data, or they like to fabricate the data just to get more attention. So we have to be, as a human rights researcher, you have to be very careful with the information that you receive. And sometimes people would say that, oh, they're shooting with the real guns, or they are open fires and etc. So some questions involve, did you see it, or did you hear it, or did you hear somebody else told you, and etc. So that kind of clarification. So sometimes people don't like it because it gives them impression that we don't trust their information. But for us, and sometimes people don't like to continue talking because they feel like, why are you asking this kind of deep questions? But for us, it's very important because the accuracy and the detail, it's very important for us, so that we can file the documentation. And if they go to the human rights court, human rights law are the laws, like international humanitarian law are the law. So it has a legal nature, and it has to be specific, and it has to be fit into the criteria. Otherwise, even though this is a horrible crime, you cannot take it accountable with the specific crime. So that knowledge and the skill set that I have learned from Human Rights Watch, and also I did my master in human rights, helped me document the abuses that I can see myself. And also I can help other people who are documenting the human rights abuses. I can help them with sharing knowledge on how to collect the information to be as valid as they can. So those are things that is helpful, because sometimes when, for example, like when we say in general word, people say, oh, this is a war crime because they are going into the hospital, or they're shooting this and that. But to fit into the category of the war crime, it have to be a conflict setting. And sometimes people will say, now like people are saying the case in Bago is a genocide because lots of people dying, but that's not even true, because genocide is very specific. And also to count it as a crime, we have to also know like whether it is a shooting at the people, or like shooting at somewhere else, and it's at a collateral damage. So in our report, we have to be very careful about the incident. So human rights documentation has to be very systematic, and it has to be it needs verification with lots of people. And if we cannot and make the conclusion of the research, like, okay, this is what people said, but there's that people said in our reporting, we will say like people said this place was the security forces used a grenade, but there was no evidence that we found that we don't see the shell, or that nobody actually saw it happen. So that kind of remark that we have to give, it doesn't mean that the information is wrong, but we want to be transparent and we want to be accurate as we can. So that's the knowledge and the skill set that I can apply in this documentation. So I can share the knowledge to the other people, because I cannot document everything. So I can ask them, I can tell them. And also like arrests and the torture cases, it's also specific cases, and we have to ask specific questions to get the detail as much as possible, the timeline and everything. So
Right. And are you engaged in that work now? Are you reporting and documenting on these kind of human rights abuses in this since the coup?
Yes, I do. I'm occasionally working with the Human Rights Watch, and the also working with the other court cases. Other people who hire me as a freelance. I'm a freelance person, so I was hired by the other people for that kind of testimony worth of data collection. That's what I do. I also volunteer myself with the one group and collecting the death toll. That's also what I'm doing. So some of them are the paid work, and some of them are the volunteers work that I do.
That's a lot of things to hold. That can be quite heavy to have to go over that information and those details day by day, as you also on a personal level are also not safe.
Yeah, no, it's really, that's why I don't want to. I'm carrying it, lots of information, so that's why I got that fear. Oh, I'm gonna be arrested. Even if I got arrested, I don't mind. But the information that I carry, those are sensitive. So I just don't want to, get caught with my phone. So even if I got caught, I want to caught red-handed, and then they will release me. So I'm also, other thing that I do is I'm also sending information to the double IWM. But everyone can do it. But for me, is that I know which one would be, they would like it. And also, I'm also like engaging with the soldier who are fleeing the military. So that information that I help them connect with the human rights organization if they want to testify, or if they need some help, or if they want to talk to the media. So
Right. And there's another thing that you do, according to my understanding as well. You are involved in a narrative analysis on social media. Can you tell a little more what that is?
well, I started it for the Rohingyas crisis. One internationally they see it as a human rights and a humanitarian crisis, but in the country that time it wasn't like that. It was, they were very, there was a huge negative sentiments towards the Rohingyas, and thinking them as an enemy, and very few people were sympathized for Rohingya. So I am trying. So internationally, like that's the problem with the international media. Sometimes that the way they frame it is very much like uh, black and white. Okay, this person is good, the victims always, and this person is the perpetrator always. But the actual things are more complicated than this, because at the beginning when it started, even though it was a state-sponsored violence, and both community in 2012, both communities suffer, both Rakhines and the Rohingyas suffer. But it turned out only one group's got more attention, which is understandable because the level and the intensity level and the violence against the Rohingyas and the suffering of Rohingya is, it's nothing compared to any other ethnics in the country. So that's why international community and the media would pay more attention to the Rohingyas. But the other problem with this is that they started making the Rakhine as the villains and the bad people, and now over time that caused the grievances amongst the people. So at the beginning, both of them wants the attention, and both of them wants their suffering to be heard. But over time, the story became like, oh, Rakhine people are bad, and then Rohingyas people are the victims. So even though they both are the victims of the system that is oppressed to both of them, but the levels are level are not the same, and there's a computation of the victimhood between them, and that costs. But the media, like the media representation, it's not quite, it doesn't touch upon the nuances and also the complexities of the issues, and over time that could more that makes more divisions between the Rohingyas and the Rakhine community, and then that put more burden on the Rohingyas community. So when the so going that time, so that's why I decided to make the narrative, because internationally, yeah, oh my god, this is horrible, and how could people have a lack of sympathy, but internally they're being brainwashed and their idea is different, the way they see the crisis is different, and some of them it doesn't really it's not just the it's not just the Rohingyas issue itself. Like lots of role that Aung San Suu Kyi play in shaping that narrative or making people believe that Rohingyas are the outsiders and they don't belong, and they're trying to take the land, and the role of the religious leaders, the monks, and trying to divide and rule, and also like the way there's an Islamophobic narrative which has existed in Myanmar since after 9/11. So that all fed into the brainwash mechanisms of the people, and people are being brainwashed not to, believe in the Rohingya suffering. So that's what I study on the Rohingya's crisis. There is a parallel narrative, the international narrative, and the local narrative. So that's how I started looking at the social, and most of the information, the discussion are happening on the social media, and Facebook became everything in Myanmar. So I was analyzing the narrative on the social media and how people understand how people see the Rohingyas crisis, and how are they so negative against the Rohingyas, and how can they not sympathize groups of people whose life are at a dire situation. So that's what I analyze. And so it's not that they don't. So that's my studies. That's what I did with the narrative. So now, like the narrative is also changing. Like on the social media, you may see like people start apologizing the Rohingyas people. So internationally, they see Burmese people as a racist people, but I argue this is a different narrative that happening around that shapes the people's minds and the behavior, and so you can see now like people have been shifted the idea, which is more like they have never seen before. So now they saw it and they experience it, and they can relate in a way how Rohingyas suffer. So yeah, that's why I'm always, rather than judging and rather than building a conclusion, I like to understand how people understand things. So that's how I study the narrative on the social media, and mainly on how the general public see the Rohingyas crisis.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think that is certainly an area that a lot of people are curious about, how they saw the issue and how there was a certain kind of coldness and, as you say, some kind of inhumane detachment from seeing these as fellow people with suffering. And so to be able to go in and dig into how are these views actually being formed and how are they being expressed, and how has that been changing? That's especially in an age of social media with the weight that carries. That's just an incredibly important topic. I'm just kind of floored by how much you're doing, how much you're holding, how much you're involved in, how far your knowledge and your activities extend, and and knowing how much you do and taking the time to talk to all of us today, and what has become quite a long interview. I just really appreciate that you would take the time to share with this foreign audience and to just go over some brief overviews of the many things that you're involved in to help to educate us and bring this understanding. And before we close, is there anything that I didn't hit upon with any of my questions that you would like to take this time and this platform to be able to speak to what is probably primarily a foreign audience about, what has been happening, what is happening now, that we didn't hit upon in this interview?
Well, the last thing was that I want to share the nature of the Burmese people. Like it just, their nature is that they, in the crisis, and if they have a common enemy, they're quite united, and they stood up against like injustice. So for them, at some point, about the Rohingyas, the way they perceive the Rohingyas issue is pretty ugly and it's really shameful. And they did that, but it's because they were in a, how do you say, like, they did, because they're being brainwashed. Like, we have a close information the whole time, and then when the countries open up, we jump the whole IT age. We jump to the social media age. So already we come from the dark, and then when we got the light, it was really bright light, and it's really hit our eyes, and which is more like that's the development of the social media, and that was a boom. And now we are getting towards the closed society, and so like we need whenever you do the analysis or like trying to understand about Myanmar, it's they are complicated people, and plus they tend to respond. They're really good at crisis responder. If in a normal situation they may not be good, but like in a crisis situation they could do their best. And like this, like collective, when they have the common enemy, they're quite united. So like this is the reason why they have been so negative towards a certain issue, is that they're being divided in rules and they're being brainwashed for many years, and they have a lack of information, and they did not they did not see the world. They couldn't see lots of places. So that's why they are there. So it's always good to engage with the local people rather than making a judgment anywhere, not only in Myanmar, rather than for the people who are privileged in the Western world, rather than making a judgment on trying to understand one society. I would encourage the people to understand what is going on and to understand the nature and the culture of the people, so that can bring the best engagement of it. But in terms of the coup, please help us in sharing our voices and support us, and talk to, if you have friends who are in Myanmar, call them and talk to them, send postcards or anything. They need that kind of hope, and that hope will continue to the end, because life is horrible, but hope is the only thing that they can, that will guide them walk out of this darkness. And I believe everything has come to an end, and we're gonna win, but we just don't know when, and we just don't know how or who will survive to see the victory, but we will definitely win. So support us.
Thank you. Yeah, those are wise and powerful words, and you definitely have my support, the support of many listeners that are coming on as well. And just thank you so much, and send you the best wishes. Your English has certainly improved since we last spoke, and much more. So that's been wonderful to check in, and we'll continue to do so as this goes on. And thank you so much for just taking the time to be able to share all that you're doing and your perspective, and inform us about what's going on there. And please be safe.
Welcome. Thank you for having me here and give me a platform to share my voice.
After today's discussion, it should be clear to everyone just how dire the situation is in Myanmar. We are doing our best to shine a light on the ongoing crisis, and we thank you for taking the time to listen. If you found today's talk of value, please consider passing it along to friends in your network. And because our nonprofit is now in a position to transfer funds directly to the protest movement, please also consider letting others know that there is now a way to give that supports the most vulnerable, and to those who are especially impacted by this organized state terror. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are resisting the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Every cent goes immediately and directly to funding those local communities who need it most. Donations go to support such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, and the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies. Or if you prefer, you can earmark your donation to go directly to the guest you just heard on today's show. In order to facilitate this donation work, we have registered a new nonprofit called Better Burma for this express purpose. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is now directed to this fund. Alternatively, you can visit our new Better Burma website, which is betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause, and both websites accept credit cards. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to those respective accounts or email us at info@betterburma.org. In all cases, that's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA. If you would like to give in another way, please contact us. Thank you so much for your kind consideration. You've been listening to the Insight Myanmar podcast. We'd appreciate it very much if you could rate, review, and/or share this podcast. Every little bit of feedback helps. You can also subscribe to the Insight Myanmar podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever else you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. If you can't find our feed on your podcast player, please just let us know and we'll ensure it can be offered there in the future. Also, make sure to check out our website for a list of our complete episodes, including additional text, videos, and other information available at insightmyanmar.org. And I also invite you to take a look at our new nonprofit organization at betterburma.org. There was certainly a lot to talk about in this episode, and we'd like to encourage listeners to keep the discussion going. Make a post, request specific questions, and join in on discussions currently going on the Insight Myanmar podcast Facebook group. You're also most welcome to follow our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts by the same name. If you're not on social media, feel free to message us directly at info@insightmyanmar.org. Or if you'd like to start up a discussion group on another platform, let us know, and we can share that forum here. Finally, we're open to suggestions about guests or topics for future episodes. So if you have someone or something in mind, please do be in touch. We would like to take this time to thank everyone who made this podcast possible. Currently, our team consists of 2 sound engineers, Mike Bink and Martin Combs. There's of course Zach Hessler, content collaborator and part-time co-host. Ken Pransky helps with editing, and a special Mongolian volunteer who is asked to remain anonymous does our social media templates. In light of the ongoing crisis in Myanmar, a number of volunteers have stepped in to lend a hand as well, and so we'd like to take this time to appreciate their effort in our time of need. And we're always on the lookout for more volunteers during this critical time, so if you'd like to contribute, definitely let us know. We'd also like to thank everyone who has assisted us in arranging for the guests we've interviewed so far. And of course, we send a big thank you to the guests themselves for agreeing to come on and share such personal, powerful stories. Finally, we're immensely grateful for the donors who made this entire thing possible. We want to remind our listeners that the opinions expressed by our guests are their own and don't necessarily reflect the host or other podcast contributors. Please also note that as we are mainly a volunteer team, we do not have the capacity to fact-check our guest interviews. By virtue of being invited on our show, there's a trust that they will be truthful and not misrepresent themselves or others. If you have any concerns about the statements made on this or other shows, please contact us. This recording is the exclusive right of Insight Myanmar podcast and may not be used without the expressed written permission of the podcast owner, which includes video, audio, written transcripts, or excerpts of any episodes. Also not meant to be used for commercial purposes. On the other hand, we're very open to collaboration. So if you have a particular idea in mind for sharing any of our podcasts or podcast-related information, please feel free to contact us with your proposal. If you would like to support our mission, we welcome your contribution. During this time of crisis, all donations now go towards supporting the protest movement in Myanmar through our new nonprofit, Better Burma. You may give by searching Better Burma on PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, GoFundMe, and Patreon, as well as via credit card at betterburma.org/donation. You can also give right on our Insight Myanmar website, as all donations given there are directed towards the same fund. And with that, we're off to work on the next show, so see you next episode.
Fight for your rights, fight for your life. There's a time for revolution.